Mr. Schaefer. Number four on the Minter Dialogue. 10 years ago was the first one. And so I was thinking, well, how am I going to start this one just a little bit different? Mr. Schaefer.
Number
First of all, how,
four, number four in your program, number one in your hearts.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Um, the way I was going to introduce you, Mark, because hopefully some people have been listening, have actually listened to all of these, and you're going to describe yourself in a moment. But I was going to go, Mr. Schaefer, given the way everybody gave you praise about this book, you're not just Mr. Schaefer, you're Mr. Marketing Shitster. Because you are breaking boundaries, breaking the status quo in so many ways. And bravo for your latest book, Audacious. In your own words, Mark, for those who skimpily don't know you, good lord, tell us, who is Mark Schaefer?
I think I'm a teacher is the way I describe myself. I mean, that's really my heart. I do consulting. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm a blogger. I have a podcast. And, this is my 11th book. And I think every interaction I have is sort of an opportunity to teach. It's a good position to be in.
No, certainly is. I think of myself as a student. Isn't that funny? So I will take in my very studently position,
Mhm.
Mark. Um, Listen, great to have you on the show, of course. And this book, it obviously has. I mean, the way you wrote it. I can't remember. Oh yeah, it was Brian Solis who was trying to ally form with content, style, substance,
Mhm.
and it feels very much that that was part of your approach to this book.
Yeah, every time I write a book, I challenge myself to make it as bold and beautiful as I can. I mean, I take it very, very seriously. Um, I'm disappointed in most business books today. Most business books today are like a blog post and 240 pages of examples. But,
Right.
I think to me, a book is part of my legacy. And so I was trying to push the edges, and especially this time because it's a book called Audacious. So it better be audacious, right? And one of the things that's unusual about this book that sort of codifies or demonstrates the themes in the book is the cover itself, which is a QR code. When you hover over the QR code, the what we did is we uploaded the book to AI and had AI generate abstract images based on stories in the book. And when you hover over the QR code, the cover changes constantly. We call it the infinity cover. And it's never been done before. And this was such a challenge, Minter, because the publishing industry, I mean, it's you can't push the boundaries in the publishing industry. They
No kidding.
basically they've been basically been doing everything the same way for 200 years. And I mean, we looked at so many different ideas and we just couldn't do any of them because of the limitations, in publishing or in distribution or the cost. But we came up with this idea and people seem to love it.
Well, and so they should, and fun, not just the cover, but within the book, you have all these QR codes and things to discover. So, you talk about how an experience is everything, and you've made the book that. So, congratulations, Mark, for
Thank you.
showing up beautifully in this
Thank you.
way.
That means a lot.
Um, So, I mean, there's so many things that I enjoyed about the book.
Oh,
I
thank
didn't
you.
know about your great grandmother, who was a vaudeville dancer on roller skates.
She
Good Lord.
was. Yeah.
That's a picture. A great aunt, snake charmer. I mean, I
Yes.
thought that's what all marketers were called.
That's
And
how I got it. You come by it
ex-
naturally.
yeah, and your great grandfather was a champion juggler, and I've had a juggler on my podcast. Street juggler to be exact. Anyway, so you said that Audacity skipped my generation. Is that true?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't put myself in that pantheon of audacity. Um, I will say, though, as I reflect on my career was one big experiment. It really was. I mean, I pushed the edges everywhere I go, everything I've done. I was just plowing ahead in some new way. And so I do think, even though, I am, a college educator, and, I might not seem like the most audacious guy. In my career, I've always been taking risks and, trying to be the first at something. So I do have that heritage.
Well, it does bring up a thought for me, which is going in all guns blazing as a cowboy into a corporate environment, saying that
Yeah.
you want to completely shake it up, make it all happen. Well, there's a whole lot of chances that you've got tripwire everywhere put down
Yeah.
by the rest of the company.
I love that analogy.
So the
That's
point that
exactly right. Hidden
so the
traps.
point, yeah, the point that I was going to make is that sometimes audacity cloaked in normal is what it takes in order for the audacity to take.
Yeah. This is a huge issue, and I address it. I have a specific chapter at the end of the book called the most important chapter in the book. And
In doubt.
reason is because all through the book, I'm encouraging people, inspiring people to be bold, to stay one step ahead of the bots. And then by the end of the book, you're probably thinking, okay, I get it, but how do I do this without losing my job? And culture is everything. I mean, your marketing is culture, the organizational culture. That's how you're going to show up in the world. And so I address it from three different perspectives. One, if you're leading a company and you want to be more bold, if you're in a company and you want to be more bold, or if you're an outsider, like a freelancer, and you want to convince customers to be more bold. And it's exactly as you said. You can't go in guns ablazing, um, but you do have to push a boundary somewhere, whether it's in your company or even in your career. And there's a great case study in that chapter about a woman who is probably the most acclaimed creative director, at least in America right now, and that is Bianca Guimarães. Bianca started a small agency in Brazil, and she realized, to really achieve her dream, she had to move to New York. She moved to New York, and she worked for a big traditional agency, and realized that the obstacle to the greatest work is fear, and that she had to take risks. She had to take risks, just enough of a risk for her to succeed. And then she became Bianca, the person who won that award, or Bianca, the person who won that contract. Then all of a sudden, it gives you a little more license and a little more liberty to have that creative freedom. And then ultimately, she started her own agency. And the core idea behind the culture is fearlessness. That she said, we will protect the dangerous ideas. We're not going to be afraid to lose an account or to lose, a job. That's what we're going to be known for. We're going to be known for the best, boldest, creative work. And the only way to do that is to operate without fear.
Well, certainly when you're an outsider approaching a large organization, all of a sudden, I mean, assuming you've got some credibility, you have the ability to push boundaries that people within don't have.
Mm,
And so having that sense of risk is really just about the one contract as opposed to my entire salary, or at least
yeah.
the bigger feeling within that. And where I wanted to go with this is that I feel we have been promoting for the last decade or so a risk-free environment
Oh, yes.
and a consequential rise in anxiety because we don't actually know how to deal with shit. And
Hmm.
so the idea of encouraging, embracing risk is everything but the way the entire society is, starting with our schools, the way we run society, sports. We shouldn't be allowed to contact. Now they're promoting contactless rugby in England. I mean, some professors are, And nothing against professors, but Mark, but
Mm.
sorry. But this idea of confronting risk, well, it doesn't seem like we're allowing risk to take place.
There's two interesting things about what you say, and one I sort of have an answer to, and the other one I don't. And the one I sort of have an answer to is in the marketing world, at least, we have this infrastructure in place that rewards boring.
Ah,
It's like, I mean, one of the big ideas I have in this book. So the book really is about in this world where AI is nipping at the heels of our skill sets and our jobs. Where do we persist? Where could we thrive? One of the examples I give in the book is word of mouth marketing. This is getting people to talk to each other. It's the purest, most trusted form of marketing, completely unadulterated by AI. We can dwell in this place. We know it works, but how many companies have a line item in their budget for word of mouth marketing? Zero. Why?
bomb.
Because it's not sexy. We can't win an award for it, right? How do you have a video about word of mouth marketing that's going to win, something at the festival? So there's this number one, there's this heritage that we have to live up to these expectations. There's this infrastructure of advertising agencies that do things a certain way. They want to keep them a certain way. We love being wined and dined by the advertising agency. There's the fear of losing our job. And I think, another point that I address directly in the book is the Bud Light effect, right? So here we have a company that, if you look at the history of that case study, it really wasn't a risk. They had been supporting like LGBTQ issues all along. One post on Instagram, really killed the brand for a couple of years at least. And so there's this idea of we're just one post away from being Bud Light. It just sends a shudder through the organization. So in terms of the marketing aspect, I think I have a good idea of why we have this infrastructure of dull. There's also a bigger picture around, let's think about the impact of social media today compared to taking a risk 20 years ago or 25 years ago. Everybody could have their own opinion 25 years ago, but it's likely that opinion wouldn't go any farther than your neighborhood or maybe a comment in the local newspaper. And today, just a few people can have a massive megaphone. It's not really about free speech. Free speech isn't the issue. It's amplification is the issue. That opinions get distorted because of amplification, and I think, and there's probably other things, but I think compared to 25 years ago, to address your question, I think the fear of social media backlash certainly has an impact on that.
Well, I mean, in the end of the day, social media is part of it, but I mean, I would say society as a rule has classified certain subjects as out of bounds. And
Mm,
so free speech, well, I'm not even, I think there are many topics we're not allowed to address for fear of being exclusive, because the
yeah.
only thing that works is being inclusive. And yet, the crazy shit about that, Mark, is that the idea is not to please everybody,
Hmm.
which is what inclusivity has as a sort of a zeitgeist.
Yeah.
The notion is I would like to have haters, as Jay used to say, hug your haters. You
Yeah.
want to have standout abilities, have conviction. And that doesn't mean liking everything and being great about every topic and backing every movement. You need to have some cojones to
Yeah.
stand out and not be afraid to be hated.
Yeah. I saw a quote recently. I can't remember who said it, but it was something like, if if people don't hate you, they probably don't love you either.
You're not doing enough,
Yeah.
whatever it is. If you haven't fallen over, you're not skiing hard enough.
Mm,
And to your point about word of mouth being boring, first of all, it made me think of I mean, Atomic Habits by James Clear. The notion of excellence comes from the ability to accept boring. If you're a pro, a tennis pro, or paddle pro, hell, the idea of hitting 1,000 backhands down the line, that's pretty boring. But
mm,
that is how you get to good. I mean, you
mm,
perfect your ability to be perfect through practice, which you talk about in the book. And then
mm,
the idea is, we do these things around awards and ROI. It's got to be effective, and how much money is this bringing it in? And as soon
mm,
as you're cutting that kind of a corner, you're likely to cut out things like Gary Vee once obstreperously said, "What is the return on investment of my mother?" Um,
mm,
Love. We used to have at Redken the director of love, and the folks at L'Oreal, who I never told them about that because they would never have accepted it at the time. Um, Generally speaking, would say, how do you justify the role of the director of love? And so the word of mouth being the sort of human component of us, we don't know where to put that in the profit and loss, much less how to encourage it, because we can't even talk about things in our company anymore.
mm, mm. Yeah, and so yeah, I agree with you, and so that's really the thesis of the book is breaking bad rules for good reason, because we are held in place by norms and by rules, and that it's just become it's almost like I can't remember what the term is, but it's almost like it gets fossilized,
Yeah,
right? I mean, I even see this in like my experience. So one of the things that's weird about our world is it's by and large guru led. So you just mentioned like Gary Vee, right? So like in my historic world, in a company you would challenge each other. I was fortunate. I lived in a company that really treated people well. They tried to do the right thing. It was kind of like an engineering um, mentality where you wanted to get the right answer. You wanted to see all the sides. You didn't want to make a mistake because
that's like a scientific
it
mindset.
was a scientific, yeah, but it was one that encouraged debate. Well, in the marketing world, it really doesn't encourage debate. It's very guru led, and so I mean, there was one example where Gary Vee said something that just it didn't make sense at all. It was even sort of like wrong, and a friend of mine, you know, whenever Gary Vee pontificates like that, then everybody starts repeating it. And a friend of mine, had like tweeted this thing that he said, and she's like a really smart, accomplished person. I said, I'm just curious. Like, did you even think about this before you tweeted it? Because I can't imagine you agree with this. She said, you're right. I don't. And it's like we sort of get these norms created by these guru-isms, and then they become like fossilized in our culture. It's like
Right.
it was said, everybody seems to conform to it and seems to agree with it, and then that's it. And then, you know, that's how we started the whole, hustle culture thing. And so the gurus in the marketing land, I'm not sure it's in every industry like that, but the gurus have this absurd power, really, to create these norms, whether they make sense or not. And so this book is like, just blow it up. Just, don't take the world for granted, and think about all the bad rules that we can break for good reason. And there's a science behind this. A book that I love is Contagious by Jonah Berger, right? I think it's a wonderful book. And one of the key principles in this book is that virality is driven by a strong emotional reaction, like love, like awe, like happiness, but also anxiety and fear. And that's what happens when you push an edge, when you make people a little uncomfortable. And we're starting to see this show up finally in the marketing world, with a brand like Liquid Death. I don't think that's available over in Europe yet, but it's the fastest growing beverage in America because they're just looking at a market like water. It's just completely dull. There's no meaning behind any of those brands. And they came in and said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to call our product Death, which I don't know about you, but my first thing I ever learned in marketing school was never associate your product with death. They call it Death. They have a mascot called the Murder Man. Their advertising is absolutely cringeworthy. I encourage everyone listening to go to YouTube and look for some of their advertising. You just won't believe it. It's certainly memorable, and they've quadrupled their sales in the last 3 years. The world is just begging for something new, begging for something different. I think another recent example is the crazy stuff Nutter Butter has been doing on TikTok. Their videos on TikTok, it's like a fever dream. It's like a bad trip on LSD. It's like a horror movie. And this is selling cookies. Again, they've tripled their sales in the last 12 months. This was a brand that literally had no meaning to anybody. Maybe we had some faint memory of that being packed in our lunch as a child. But and then you think about almost every industry. Cars. Who's going crazy with cars? Wine, pizza. And pizza it's fun. It's a celebration. Everybody loves pizza. It's young people love pizza. Who's doing something interesting with pizza? It's just dull. Has been normalized. It's been normalized, and the world is just ripe for disruption.
All right, so pushback time. Liquid Death certainly
Yeah,
sounds interesting.
yeah,
Um, I have been fan for 40 years of a rock and roll band that has death in the name. And I've been very grateful for
yeah,
that relationship
yeah,
because there I feel like it's been meaningful to me
yeah.
in that the very concept of the Grateful Dead is once you know that you die, you
Mm,
are forever grateful.
mm,
And so what I feel is wonky in such an idea is where's the meaningfulness? How much better are we making society by selling liquid death?
mm.
I frankly am a big fan of psychedelics, as you can imagine.
Yeah, yeah,
And what I see are people wanting to talk about the fear of LSD. So they'll raise the example in 1956 of the guy who threw himself out a window on a trip,
sure.
but forgetting facts like the fact that he took 70 micrograms, which is
Mm.
just an enormous dose, and had some
Yeah,
underlying psychological issues.
yeah.
So we can do things that stand out, but are we actually doing anything for society? Making me buy another pizza or Dorito potato
Mhm.
chip, I don't feel is making me a better person or society a better place.
Yeah. That's a big conversation.
Like, hey, we'll roll into it a little bit anyway, Mark.
That's a big conversation. Um, so let me break it down. Let me break it down.
Go.
All right. So here we've got an entrepreneur who, isn't necessarily a big fan of water, but he sees an opportunity to disrupt this market. And the main, so the biggest problem every business has today is awareness. Every person listening to us today, every company, they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be discovered. So that is the big issue. And it's harder than ever because we're living in this pandemic of dull, and AI is just littering the world with boring content that makes it even worse. So awareness is the key to success for any business. You have to create customers, and you have to start with awareness. Now, I think the main lesson with Liquid Death is there is nothing the founder of that brand could do to create awareness that Coke and Pepsi couldn't copy. If he came up with a new flavor or some new special thing, they're bigger, they have more money, they're just going to get copied. The only thing they have is the brand, is the message, right? So Coke would have a lot to lose if they started creating something called death. Same with Pepsi. But when you're a startup and a disruptor, you've got nothing to lose. So why not have some fun? Now, that that is not necessarily making the world better, but it's creating a brand that's fun, that's an alternative. Now, the deeper part of this is, well, I don't know if we even want to open up that Pandora's box, but
Oh, well, do, Mark. Hey, listen, this is have open discussion.
I do think and I've sort of addressed this now and then on my blog about really the deeper responsibility and accountability for marketing and consumerism. And if something that's very close to my heart is the really obscene, hurtful, destructive things that happen on social media. And why is that happening? It's happening because marketers buy ads. As long as we buy ads, and then we're going to fuel the beast. And specifically, that beast is hate and divisiveness.
And
All right.
fear. Yeah.
So, because hate is good for business. When people are arguing, then they spend more time on the site. And the more time they spend on the site, the more information is collected, the more advertising they see, all the metrics go up for, Meta or another social media platform. And then brands, we love that. If they're getting more views, if they're getting more users, if there's more engagement. So it's just like this
Vanity.
it's this never-ending cycle that literally is being fueled by brands. So I mean, in one respect, I mean, I agree with you that marketing is having a harmful effect by creating this consumerism, by the consumerism that's just out of control, by not thinking through the impacts on the environment, the impacts on mental health that we're creating directly or indirectly by promoting brands the way that we do. So there's a big soapbox.
Yeah, but what about, I mean, pushing back not on you, but Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. I don't believe that they are doing a great thing for society by selling diet sugar-free sodas. I mean, diet-free sugars, that's lots of chemicals, and we don't want to talk about that. Hey, listen, good news is no sugar. But oh boy, is the rest actually healthy? And the idea that I think needs to happen, or this is the part of the conversation I want to have, which is where's the role for ethics and ethical frameworks to know that that's beyond the pale? The idea of Stephen Jobs say, as you quote, says, why not, don't join the Navy when you can be a pirate? Well, what about like commitment to community and service to country? So being a pirate's great because that's all about individuals. Hey, listen, look at me. I get to go and storm and do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah.
But I mean, you shoot first and ask questions later. Ask for
Yeah.
forgiveness, not permission.
Well,
What of the ethical framework?
I think that I'm going to be very direct and with this
Go
observation.
for it.
Nobody cares.
Hmm.
Nobody cares. So this is an exercise I do with my classes because there's this idea of meaning and purpose and doing good for the world, right? Purpose-driven brand, values-driven brand. We all want to be Patagonia, right? Okay.
Mhm.
So I do this exercise. Think about everything you've purchased in the last month.
Mhm.
It could be a hamburger. It could be petrol for your car. It could be a jacket because the weather's getting cold.
A
It could
gadget for my paddle racket.
Yeah, a gadget for your paddle racket. It could be a plant for your office. Now, of everything that you purchased, how many of those products do you know where those brands stand on any social issue? And the answer all the time is
No idea. Yeah.
zero.
Mhm.
Nobody cares. You just want a sandwich because you're hungry. So don't force all this stuff down my throat. I just
Mhm.
want to listen to music because it's music.
Mhm.
I just want this jacket because it's pretty. Uh, and so it's a two-edged sword where aligning with meaning and values is certainly a way to engender loyalty. The research shows that if people know that you stand up for something that they believe in, they will go out of their way to buy you, to advocate you. They'll even pay up to 25% more for the product because we have shared values. But it's not for everyone. In fact, it's for almost no one because most of the time we just don't care. We just, we want we're watching TV and we want to eat some popcorn. Where we want, we just, you know, we want a Diet Coke because we have a fond memory because I used to have a Diet Coke with my dad.
Right.
Um, so,
Which is
so,
meaningful, by the way.
well, yeah,
Ah,
it's an emotional connection, but that's different than doing good for the world, right? So my point is, you know, doing good for the world is not a major goal of most companies.
well,
And
I want to go in your way, Mark, and say
yeah,
I agree with you. I mean,
yeah,
the idea of, I mean, I've written about this, doing good for the world. That's just naughty land, where, you have no actually idea of how to render that. Doing good for your street, for
hmm
your local community,
yeah,
within
yeah,
reach and realistic,
yeah,
that seems like a wholly better idea. And yet,
yeah,
what we most companies tend to want to do is, look at me, I'm doing good for the world. And of
yeah,
course, nobody believes that, because you can't fix famine, you can't do world
right.
peace. Yeah, much like
This
we
is
all
this
want
is
it, but that's
yeah.
not
I mean
right.
this is something that I wrote about in Marketing Rebellion. I mean, you and I talked about that a couple years ago
Yeah.
about don't don't lend a hand, be the hand. Show up in your community. Don't just say it. Get out there. And that drives a lot of word of mouth and it drives a lot of credibility for your brand. It creates that emotional connection. And I do believe in that. I really do. And here's a trend. In fact, I think I should write about this on my blog.
There you go.
Here's this is the opposite of what you and I are talking about. So I don't know if you're seeing this in the UK and in Europe, but there's thing now in America where many businesses, when you check out before you complete your transaction, they have your credit card and it says, "Do you want to donate $1 to this charity? Or do you want to round up this thing to the nearest dollar to donate to this charity?" I think that is so crass that you're taking my money so that you can say you support this cause, which I may not even know what it is. And you're putting me on this transactional guilt trip right now so that it makes you seem like, you're doing
Yeah.
something good for the world. Stand up and do freaking something in our community. Who knows where this money's gonna go? I mean, that is the worst slacktivism
Mhm.
that you can imagine. But I do agree with you. I really do. In my heart, there is value. There is in showing up and not lending a hand, but being a hand.
Mhm.
And there's lots of great examples of where that works. And the reason when I wrote that in 2019, it was sort of prescient because in 2020, boom, there's the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
And the only thing brands can do is show up in the community and help.
Yeah, I love it. And make some strategic
Yeah,
choices
and
about
the
where you show
ones
up.
that really did it will be remembered forever.
One of the you sort of broach it in the book, which is this the notion of play. And Jordan Peterson talks about it as being such an important part. It makes me think of the amazing the guy who did the Yellow Bananas baseball team.
Yeah,
He's
Jesse Cole.
Jesse Cole, exactly. There's the brilliance in that, and I, of course, I'm a little bit uh, schizophrenic when I say that I also believe in play. I mean, I went to see the Grateful Dead,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
couple hundred times,
yeah,
1,000 concerts. I
yeah,
play, with my
yeah,
head inside my
yeah,
head, and I play paddle.
yeah,
And so I think the value of play. I was wondering just talk about the value of play in society, the value
yeah.
of play in enterprise, and how can you, whether you're within, on top, or without, as you the 3 points of view in your most important chapter, talk about how do you bring play in?
Well, one of the things that was so different about this book, and this is my 11th book, and every time I finished a book in the past, I would be completely worn out. When I
Mm,
finished this book, I was energized. And I told my wife, I'm sad it's over.
mm,
This was so much fun. And the reason why was I got to enter a whole new world of these creative geniuses. This is a world you're probably a lot more familiar with than I am because of your, marketing roles in the past. And one of the themes everywhere was this idea of play, was this idea of somehow recapturing that childlike innocence where there are no rules. You hand them clay, you hand a child paper, and you who knows what's going to happen, including eating it. um, and and so it was like it is just part of the DNA of all of these companies. And one of the things that I learned from this is to institutionalize play in your life, that your experiences are your creative currency. So go out of your way, just take a new route, you know, do something, different, watch something different, do something opposite of what you normally do. And I mean, just for me, like going into a new city, especially in a different country, and just walking around and looking at stores and looking how they sell things and how people interact and how they engage, how they communicate, how do they use smell and music and art. It creates this uh, this encyclopedia of experiences you can call on later, in your creative process. So, you know, um, and this idea of letting go and tapping into these experiences in a safe environment was certainly a theme everywhere at all of these agencies.
well, I love that, Mark. One of the counterpoints of this, and I mean, just to pull a few other dots together, what one of the things I was going to mention before about the way you commented on my question was you introduced, I think, a very important concept, which is critical thinking.
Mm,
Did you think about what you just reposted about Gary Vee to be back to
yeah,
the specific context? And there
yeah,
you're saying you're introducing critical thinking, which isn't something that necessarily a child has, but I think is vital, and
mm,
ability to fact check. The other thing which I wanted to bring in, which is awe, the
mm,
notion of awe. And the
yeah,
interesting thing about awe is that it's childlike by
yeah,
definition somehow,
hmm,
because in my company, as soon as you showed awe or surprise, oh, well, that's not very intelligent.
mm,
In other words, it's sort
interesting.
of it's an exposure of your
Mm,
ability to be swayed, almost
mm.
your naivete. But I
Oh,
think
wow.
being naive is
Yeah,
part of enjoying awe.
yeah. I can see that. I can see that. That happened to me recently where I discovered a new band. Wow, I just love this band. And I was with a group of people who, really like music, and I was so excited about it. And I felt awe about this band. It brought me so much.
It was called the Rolling Stones.
No, no, no. I'm not gonna. But what happened was this band had been around for a while, and so this group of, kind of music snobs made me feel bad
Yeah.
that they were like trying to humiliate me that I just discovered this, right? And it's just
Mm.
instead of like just
Embracing it. Oh, I'm
embracing
so
the
glad you like.
childlike,
Why do you like it? And
yeah, embracing this childlike joy.
mm.
So I can kind of see your point there. But I think this is one of my proudest moments about this book is introducing this idea of awe in a marketing context, right? It's fundamental in a way. And again, what's this book about? Where do we persist as human beings in this marketing world being overrun by bots? And one of the ways we can do this is bring people together in some meaningful way that creates a shared experience that leads to the term I use in my book is collective effervescence. It's this emotional contagion, just like you at a Grateful Dead concert, right? If you were listening to a Grateful Dead concert, in your kitchen through earbuds, that might be great. It might make you happy. But when you're there spinning around and dancing and singing with there's awe. It's this emotional contagion of collective effervescence. Now, this is a massive opportunity for marketing because we live in a world that doesn't have shared experiences like we used to. You know, um, when you and I were young, we had to save our money for a record album. And when we got that record album, we'd play it over and over again, and we'd invite our friends over, and we'd read the lyrics. We'd
We played the whole thing in order.
you'd play it in order, and then flip it, and then play that, right? And then you'd probably have some food together, and there was a shared experience. And today, most of the world is consuming their media. They're experiencing their world alone, binging their favorite content alone, and it's not creating that awe. So that is a unique, distinctively human role that we can play in this world of marketing to bring people together in this way that creates awe, that connects them to our brand. It's not showing them an ad. Immerse them in the feeling of your company. Immerse them in what you're about, so that they'll always remember it.
Well, I want to get into that just one second, but I couldn't avoid avoid this little side joke of how come you didn't call it audacious? Um,
I just couldn't.
um,
Some other people have said that. It was, yeah,
yeah, but what
too
it
on the
does,
nose or something.
yeah, what it does do is, I mean, all these discussions and elements around playfulness and awe is about the humanity piece, and it's something that I find tremendously interesting. I want to finish our chat here, Mark, on this notion of experience, and I'm going to contextualize it because I feel like I'm always trying to elevate the debate somehow. And I interviewed
I
a chap
think you've
called.
already done a very good job of that today, by the way.
Thank you, sir. But the guy I interviewed was a guy called Chris Kerr. He's a doctor, and while he began as a sort of traditional doctor, he quickly morphed into a hospice care doctor.
Hmm.
And in his life, he's interviewed, or he's accompanied more than 2,000 people to their death. And in the interviews that he's done, these sort of exit interviews, if you will, to use a term in
Yeah.
corporate lingo that just takes another turn,
Yeah.
in his exit interviews, the two things that matter in life
Hmm.
are your relationships
Hmm.
and experiences.
I would have guessed one of them would have been Diet Coke, but I was wrong.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, that's
in,
true.
in
That's
Europe, we
absolutely
have a
true.
different thing. So bringing these immersive experiences into life into work that I think necessarily have to have an element of play,
Mhm.
surprise, delight,
Mhm.
humanity,
Yeah.
messiness, imperfection, naughtiness. Gosh,
Mhm.
why not? And sometimes exclusivity, because
Yeah.
that also is part of why we want to get together. I mean, the Grateful Dead aren't exclusive, but they don't please everybody. And
Mhm.
halla freaking Lulia. And what a
Mhm.
great, as David Meerman Scott said, what a great marketing message or for philosophy ever since
Mhm.
they've been around.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love the way you sort of tied everything together there. And I think your message is very, very powerful and very, very timely because, we sort of see in the news that the younger generation has kind of had it with the old way to live. And they really put an emphasis on experiences, on travel, on shared experiences and friends and relationships. But it's not just young people. A lot of older people now are saying, I've had it. It's time for me to really experience life. Especially, we've got the baby boomers, this generation, the richest generation in the world. They're starting to retire and starting to spend their money in different ways. It's about relationships and about experiences. Um, and yeah, I love the way you brought it all together and really sort of validated some of the principles in the book that I wrote about.
Absolutely. I mean, this idea of humanity, and it's the thing about it, which is the complicated element from a governance standpoint, is accepting imperfection.
Hmm.
As much as you might be an engineer trying to figure out how to make a bridge that doesn't collapse because
Hmm.
below perfection isn't a good idea.
Hmm.
We've created this riskless, perfect like existence, which is counter to what humanity is, which is a messy,
Yeah.
dirty, sometimes naughty, always a bit bad, because that is who we are. And professing or showing values that and standards to which we don't even hold ourselves accountable for. That hypocrisy has created all sorts of dissension within ourselves. And if I were to say one of the problems we have with anxiety, depression, and everything in our society is because we've detached ourselves from reality and meaningfulness. So if you're in a company and you want the awareness, you also need to get people within your company that believe in you. And I wanted to have you just this idea I had at the very beginning of the conversation, but I forgot about it, which is humor, sense of humor.
Hmm.
That's about as human as it gets, right? I mean, there are some chimps and so on that definitely have a sense of humor. But having a sense of humor is a specific idea. British sense of humor, some sense of humor at the cost. I mean, basically, humor is always at the cost of something.
Hmm.
And I recall some person who had this really cheeky, really gripping, engaging social media handle, but then she left, and there was nobody who incarnated her sense of humor. So having a one-off agency that comes in and says, this is something really radical, you can do it. Or one individual in your organization that can be really funny, cheeky, and get engagement, but it's not
Yeah.
part of your bigger culture and what you're all about, is a big risk. I think that
Yes.
notion of having a deeper culture,
Yeah.
ability to take risks. This is, I think, the final audacious message.
Yeah. Boy, I mean, there's so much there to unpack. So, but let me just
Go
comment
for
on
it.
a few things briefly. Number one, the messiness, right? So that's another big trend right now. There was a story in the news maybe 2 weeks ago about how these video game companies are spending millions and millions of dollars to create things that are realistic. And the gamers are saying, no, we like sort of the raw kind of stuff. And there's examples in the book where leaving it a little out of focus makes it more credible. It sort of signals that this is a real human being. Uh, Humor, yes, absolutely. And the risk of humor, it sort of has to be native to your brand. And there's also a danger in that it's almost like a piñata, right? You can only really bang it once. So, if there's a meme online, I had a conversation with a university class last week, and they were talking about this meme, and then all these brands come on and try to be funny, and they said, "Oh my gosh,
Newsjacking.
it's funny once, it's funny once, but now, so you can only hit that, you can only really be audacious once. You hit the pinata one time, the candy comes out, and then you got to move on to something else." So yeah, just a couple things to build on there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the right book for the right time because I mean the marketing world is just so darn boring, and I mean it doesn't have to be a stunt. It doesn't, and you don't have to be reckless. I'm not saying be reckless. You know, I'm not saying break the law. I'm not saying be offensive, but just be one step crazier than your competition and see what happens.
Yeah, you talk a lot about South by out in Austin, whose city logo is something about being weird and liking it that way.
Yeah.
That is it, being crazy, a little crazy for a little
Yeah.
bit of the crazies and the
Yeah.
weirdos. Let's keep
Yeah.
it going. Mark, how can people, of course, get your book? What's the easiest way? And or follow you? What do you like? Where do you like to hang out and have people read what you're up about?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you. I loved our conversation and realized how much I miss our conversations.
Okay.
And it's easy to find me. You don't have to remember my name if you can remember Businesses Grow. That's my website. So my blog is there, my podcast is there, all my social connections, and the books. Today, we're talking about Audacious, how humans win in an AI marketing world. We also mentioned Marketing Rebellion. We kind of even hinted at the community book belonging to the
Mhm.
brand, which I know, we had a good discussion about that. And you can find those books on Amazon.
Beautiful. Mark Schaefer, professor or a shitster. So I add that one. Great
Thank
to
you
have
so
you.
much. Thank
It's so
you.
much fun. See ya, Mark.